good turnout for a rainy, miserable night. But in here, we're going to have fun. And I can still remember Tom, when Tom was this high running around here. Long time ago. But he's come back. His parents live up in the Prescal area. There used to be members of our church many moons ago. And he's here to tell us about his ministry. So come on out, brother.
Being that small, but the building's a lot smaller.
I was that small one time too.
Yeah.
Everybody's that small today.
Yeah, fair enough. So, hey, I'm really glad to be able to be out here with all you folks tonight. My name's Tom Watson, and I work with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. It's a college ministry that is dedicated to working with students and faculty on college campuses. And the three main goals of the ministry are to see students and faculty's lives transformed, to see the campus communities renewed, and to see world changers developed during their time at college. So as students are being poured into in the college campus, as they go back out to their communities and their homes, to kind of bring that change and to bring the hope that they have with them where they're going. So this isn't going to be super duper formal. I just want to give you guys an update on how things have been going with the ministry. This is my second year with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. And, there have been a lot of ups and downs. I think I had a pretty good idea in some ways of what I was getting into when I took the job, and I think that in a lot of other ways I didn't have any idea what it would look like, because week by week and month by month it completely fluctuates what kind of work I'm doing and what kind of things I'm focusing on. So I guess I just want to share some highlights from the past year. I want to share some things that I'm really looking forward to coming up in the next year. Hopefully I would really appreciate any prayers that you guys could have for those events that we have coming up. So the main ministry, the way things look right now is that we have Bible studies on campus. We also have a regular prayer group that's been gathering this semester, which has been a great event. And one of the things I've appreciated most about this semester particularly is that last year there were a lot of times that I would meet up with students and we would just grab a cup of coffee and we wouldn't talk about much in particular about God. We would just get to know each other, talk about how college was going. And in a lot of ways, maybe I, last year felt, I should be having these deep conversations with them. But throughout the year that kind of continued. And then this semester I'm meeting with them. And maybe we'll get coffee. Maybe went with some students to the fair when it was in town there at Farmington. I should probably say that. I work at the University of Maine at Farmington. Out in Farmington is mainly where I'm at. But anyways, the students just started bringing things up. We'd sit down. We'd say, hey, how are your classes? And they'd be like, oh, my classes are good. What's up with God anyways? And I'd back up and I'm like, oh, well, great. So we've had all sorts of really good conversations this semester, and that's been a huge thing. There have been a couple of students that aren't Christians over there that have agreed just to meet up one-on-one with me and just kind of flip through passages of the Bible, talk about what we see in the Gospels. With one student, we've started picking through Genesis and talking about what we see there, what it says about God, and that's been just an incredibly rewarding time. One of the key highlights from this past year, as well as one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to in the year to come, was a program that InterVarsity has been doing for a while called Serve Up. And Serve Up basically is an alternate spring break experience in which we kind of take students from all over New England and we go on, you could call it a service trip, you could call it a short-term missions trip, to a part of the country that's been kind of hit hard by disaster, and we kind of provide disaster relief. We do service to those communities, and I got to be a part of that this past year. We grabbed 5 students from the University of Maine Farmington, and we went down to New Orleans, Louisiana, to help clean up after some hurricanes that had hit there. And it was wild. It was So they prepared me for this, right? They're like, okay, here's what you tell students. Here's the information you give them when you're making the pitch. You know, you grab students and you're like, this is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be like, it's going to be a bus ride down. It'll take like 24 hours to get all the way down there and 24 hours to get all the way back. I didn't know I was lying at the time because it took about 38 hours to get down there in a blizzard. And we were seeing cars rocketing off the road around us in this big rented bus. So we get down there and we're, you know, barely have a pulse, like everybody's kind of stumbling off the bus, and we get a nice crisp 3 hours of sleep, and then, you know, rock it up the next day and start in. And each campus was kind of assigned their own site to be at, all over New Orleans and all over surrounding areas that had been hit by the hurricane. And I believe this was Hurricane Ida that had done a lot of the damage that we were dealing with. But a lot of the damage stretched all the way back to Katrina. It's incredible. There's just a steady stream of natural disasters of one kind or another just rocketing through that area. So there's a lot of work that was needed to be done and still needs to be done. We ended up getting assigned to an elderly woman's house, about late 80s, early 90s, Christian woman living by herself out there. And her living room had kind of been, the door had been knocked in because it was kind of the front room to the house. And then it seemed like there was a lot of water damage. So all the sheetrock was gone, all the insulation was gone. So we went in there. And I really need to give context. I have no idea how to do anything with building a house at all. No idea. Thankfully, we had a volunteer from somewhere around Durham, New Hampshire, who came down with us in our group to kind of give technical advice. We ended up being able to insulate the room. We insulated the ceiling. We put sheetrock on the walls. We put sheetrock on the ceiling. Putting sheetrock on a ceiling is a horrible experience. You know, we were able to put a front wall on, and we were able to discover just how long fiberglass stays in your clothing. It stays in your clothing a really, really long time. I don't know if you guys knew that. It does, forever. I thought about just starting from scratch, getting rid of everything I brought, but you know, eventually it worked its way out. And I make it sound bad because there were a lot of kind of type 2 fun type of experiences where it was, you know, you were trying to figure out why on earth you were there while you were there, and then later on you look back and you're like, that was incredible. I'm so glad that I was covered in fiberglass. And you know, yeah, she was, the woman we were helping was very grateful. And it was really it was an amazing experience. It's kind of the highlight of what I've done so far working with the ministry. For one thing, a lot of times, like, we do conferences a lot, right? We'll do conferences where we'll have speakers who will be teaching on the Bible, and then you have a breakout room where you get to talk about the Bible, and then you get to go somewhere else where they'll probably talk to you about the Bible, which is really, really awesome. But it's a really hard sell to a student who already doesn't, like, know much about God, who isn't a Christian, who isn't that committed to hearing about what's in the Bible. Because saying, would you like to go a couple states over to hear about the Bible for 3 days is not actually the most effective pitch. But there were a lot of students who went on this trip with us who weren't Christians, who weren't even really interested in that aspect of it, but were really excited by the idea of being able to go and help a community in need. And we went down, and most nights we had Bible studies while we were down there. In the evenings, we had discussions. And these Bible studies and discussions were kind of geared towards like anybody from any like spiritual background, kind of, you know, focusing on the theme of restoration and how God longs to see restoration, and kind of talking about the restoration that we saw the need for in the community that we were serving. And there were a lot of really great conversations with these students. There's one of them who I'm still in touch with. He's one of the students that I've been picking through the Bible with this semester. And it was just a fantastic time. We, on the 38-hour, more like 34, 32 on the way back, bus ride home, I checked in with each of the students. I talked to them, and they were saying things like, you know, yeah, I mean, I might not be 100% convinced, but I'd like to look more into like what a Christian community looks like. Hearing things like, you know, that it was the first time a lot of them had seen a Christian community in action. You know, it wasn't it was a tangible thing that they were seeing. And so that's something that I'm really looking forward to coming up this spring as well. We've just started advertising to students, for lack of a better word, campaigning, recruiting. We've been asking students if they want to go on the trip again, and we're really looking forward to it. I think that it's a huge spiritual opportunity for students. It's a huge opportunity for students to serve a community and to get an idea of, to kind of dip their toe in on volunteerism. Well, not so much dip their toe in, we kind of push them in, but it's full submersion for a week, but it's a great experience. So that's something that we're really looking forward to coming up in the future. Speaking of those conferences we had our fall conference not too long ago in October. I say not too long ago, it feels like it was a really, really long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. And that was a great experience. We were able to, we had students from all over the New England area come together and kind of engage with the different, my brain's gonna take a second to buffer now. So engaging with the different breakout groups that we had, the different themes in the conference. The theme of the conference this year was encountering Jesus through stories. And so there were a lot of different breakout groups based on students' interests. Like one group went on a hike. I was able to co-lead a group with another staff member who works down at the University of New Hampshire at Durham on a group called, Who is Jesus? And this was really geared towards new Christians, towards folks who weren't Christians, and it was really exploring kind of how we all have baggage put away of our thoughts of God, and kind of unpacking that one piece at a time, and then comparing it to what the gospel says about who Jesus is, and saying, how much of these notions that we have of who God is, who Jesus is, are accurate, and how many aren't. And that was a wonderful experience to be able to do. It was also a heartbreaking experience because one of the students in there was a student who had recently lost her sight, and that was something that she was dealing with at the time. And one of the passages that we went over was, the passage where Jesus heals the man who's blind. He spits in the mud and he makes mud and puts it on his eyes, and that hit her hard because she was trying to figure out, is there something he's trying to tell me? Why would something like this happen? Very independent person, so that was a hard but good conversation to be able to have, for sure. One of the biggest outreaches that we've been doing, because we do try to do things that engage with the wider community on campus, and we get together with our student leaders and kind of do our huddle, and one student threw out, well, we'd like to do a raffle. And I said, okay, great. And so the idea is that we made a raffle basket with a bunch of movie theater tickets and some candy and stuff. We put out the basket, and for each ticket that they wanted to fill out, all they needed to do was they needed to ask us a question about God, the Bible, Christianity, and then they got an entry into the basket. And so we ended up with a big fat stack of these questions that I've been trying to go through carefully and respond to one at a time, and trying as much as possible to kind of, instead of just sending out the answer, create a dialogue back and forth with the student, maybe meet up with them. But that was a fantastic event, and it still is a big portion of what I've been working on lately. I think it's kind of invaluable to be able to see what students are thinking and what's going on in their heads and in their worlds. The questions, a lot of them centered around who or what is God, a lot of questions about the Bible, how it's organized, why there are so many different versions, how accurate is the Bible. And one of the things that came up a lot that has been probably the hardest to respond to is a lot of questions about pain and hurt and suffering, and why that happens, how God fits into their pain and their suffering and the things that they're going through, how if God's so good, are they able to experience so much suffering? And I'll be honest, you know when you're doing work and you keep putting off a certain portion, I have definitely kept putting off those 2 or 3 questions that are in that realm, because as much as I might have a theological answer that feels really good and it feels pretty accurate, sometimes the technical answer isn't the right answer if they're in a place where they're really hurting and they're in a place where like there's a loss that's fresh. Like a couple of the questions were directly like referencing like the recent loss of loved ones, and so like, you know, that's it's what's on people's minds. Like if they turn their thoughts to God, they're wondering like why do these things happen? And so I would personally really treasure your prayers as I go on and as we work towards answering those questions and on engaging with those students and talking to them about that. I really would appreciate that. As far as other things that we're looking forward to coming up in the future, we have a conference this December called the Urbana Conference, which is a gathering of students and college ministry people. I don't know. I'm a person and I work in college ministry, so that seems to be the right term. From all over the country, and I believe from parts of Canada too. And it's basically a 3-day conference with worship music, with a lot of biblical teachers coming through, and a lot of folks from around the global church kind of sharing about their experiences from different parts of the body of Christ around the world. And a big part of it is exploring ministry, whether students decide to go into it professionally, or what it looks like to pursue ministry in whatever career, whatever path God has for them. And that's a big question for students as they like approach the end of their time in college, especially if they've been involved with ministry, is okay, what does this look like going forward? I know that when I'm on college campus, like I'm involved with this particular ministry and we do studies and we do this and we do that and we do outreaches, but what do I do like when I become a teacher at a high school? What do I do when I, go out and become an accountant? What do I do then? Like how do I live my life in ministry? How do I live my life pouring out to others? And what does it look like outside of college to live the Christian walk? So this is a great chance for students to explore that. We have one student in particular who's really excited to go, and we're really excited to be bringing her down. Yeah. Yeah. The ministry has been a really wonderful experience, and I absolutely have loved it, and I look forward to doing a lot more work. But I think I was also surprised by just how punishing it can be. There are some days in the job that kind of leave you feeling like you've had your teeth kicked in. Because I think that it's really easy to forget that it's God doing the work. And I think that especially the way I think, I want to do well. I want to be able to take care of people, and there are a lot of times where there's just either there's not necessarily something you can do, or where it's not necessarily clear what you can do. Yeah, it's hard to work in a on the college campus sometimes, because there's so much that seems just completely and utterly broken, and there's so much that you see so much need, you see so much that you'd like to do, you see so many things you'd like to be able to do, and it's not always possible. There are a lot of times where students are just in incredibly hard spots. They're hurting, things have gone down, and you don't necessarily know what to say, and there's probably not actually something to say. And it's very difficult to be in a line of work where there aren't really tangible signs of progress. You can put in all the work you want, but it's all in God's timing. So sometimes it just looks absolutely stagnant. And sometimes you would just love to have a day where you get done and there's an actual tangible product that you've produced through your work. So you can say, look, I made a thing. But it's a job where a lot of times, you put a lot of work in and you're not sure exactly what the result was, and you might never know what the result was. You don't know what impact a conference had on a student. You don't know what they're thinking during a conversation. You don't know what will ever come of seeds that you plant today, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And so there have been a lot of times over the past year where I've just found myself really discouraged and really worn out. But it's something that I always bounce back from because I love the work, and there are just so many ways that God is very clearly moving. And God has really surrounded me with a lot of churches and a lot of individuals who have stepped in around me and supported. But that's just, I just share that because I would really treasure your prayers on that. It can be a lonely line of work. It can be a little bit discouraging sometimes. Yeah, but there are certainly amazing things going on. I don't personally work with Kobe College much. They have a couple who volunteer named the Corbetts, and they have a very active student leadership team. But one of the big things that's really encouraging in the state of Maine that I've heard lately is that there's a lot going on at Kobe College with the ministry there. They've had over 20 freshmen become involved with the ministry just this semester. They've had an extremely involved, extremely dedicated group of student leaders there. And it's really exciting because I believe they're all juniors this year, which is great because a lot of times there's the turnover issue in college. You get some leaders who are really excited, really dedicated to the ministry, and then they graduate, and then you kind of start from scratch. But they have it seems like they're going to have some consistent ministry leadership going on out there. And it's possibly on the horizon that we'll be able to do a Maine state conference for InterVarsity, in the first time in a long time, with folks from, hopefully, if we can, with folks from UMF, Thomas, Kobe, Bates, and Bowdoin, and the Corbetts out here at Kobe have really been spearheading that, and so we're really looking forward to that, and we hope that coming up, hopefully this February, will be good. Will be an opportunity to pour into the ministry in Maine, kind of knit together these really disjointed ministries on different college campuses, and kind of, yeah, I'm just excited to see what the future will hold with college ministry in the state of Maine. Yeah. As far as the finances of the ministry go, I would deeply appreciate any prayers that you folks could do. We do have a pretty sizable gap in the funding that we're working on filling right now. It's not a serious thing. It's not like the ministry is going to go away, but it's something that I'd be very happy to see filled. It's taking up a lot of time to try to fill that right now, that I'd really be happy to be able to spend with students on the campus. So if you folks could be praying for that. It's about a $9,000 gap we're trying to fill right now. So, yeah. I don't know specifically what people might want to hear about the ministry. And so instead of rambling on, I'd love to be able to ask kind of open the floor up to questions, anything that folks are curious about for the ministry, anything about what we do, anything about what we see coming up on the horizon.
I'd like to tell you a little story. I went to UMF, graduated in 1975, and a friend of mine, Jack Wyman, and I, we lived in a trailer just outside the school here in Silver Maple Trailer Park. We had this guy that was in quite a few of our classes. His name was Gordy. He was like the hippies hippie. So we decided to have Gordy over to dinner one day. He said, come over, we'll have some spaghetti or something. So Gordy comes over. Well, Jack and I were Christians, and we witnessed to him. You know, and so we ate, and then he said, oh yeah, he said, I know you guys believe in this stuff. And he said, that's fine. He said, that's not my thing and everything. So, you know, we didn't hear from Gordy. Well, about 10 years later, Jack calls me up one day. He goes, you never heard of, guess who called me? I says, who? He says, Gordy. He says, Gordy called you? He goes, yeah. He said, he's in Washington, D.C. working in a youth ministry. He told me, he said, I always remember what you guys talked to me about. And he said, eventually became a Christian. He said, now I'm working with youth in Washington, D.C. So you don't know what happens, you know, what you say to people, where it's going to go. We never, I mean, I would have said, Gordy's not really a prime candidate to become a Christian, but he was. You never know how God's going to use his word.
Oh yeah, yeah. You never do know. Yeah, I mean, even me having this position that I have now with the ministry, I remember when I was first going around speaking to churches, I went around with the guy who held the position at UMF that I held before me, a guy named Jacob Marcoux, and he, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He's teaching out there now, out in Pittsfield. He's teaching at the middle school, 7th grade, I think. But anyways, he would go to these churches and he'd kind of drag me up to the front, and he'd kind of point at me and say, "This guy walked into an ice cream social we were doing as if he did not want to be there, as if it was the last place on earth he wanted to be. And if you had asked me if I thought he would ever work on staff, I would have told you you were absolutely crazy." And the first time I heard the story, I was like, yeah, that's funny. And a few times later, I was like, okay, we can stop telling that story. But yeah, I mean, you just, it's who God calls, and it's God working. All God asks of us in ministry, I think, is to be faithful and to kind of stand where he says to stand, say what he says to say, and then the results are in his hands. And I think that that's incredibly liberating to know and to think about. But I think a lot of times, just the way that we are in the United States and the way that we think, we really want to be involved. We want to succeed. We want to do the work, and we want to be able to point and say, look what I did. Isn't that great? And a lot of times it's God working, and a lot of times it's God working despite us.
Alone up there as part of you? Are you working with anybody else at the same time? How does it work?
Am I alone out at UMF? Yeah. So in a lot of ways, yeah. I'm the only staff member for InterVarsity working in the state of Maine with college students. We have a guy who lives out in Wiscasset, who named Will Truesdale. He used to work with Kobe and Bates, but now he works as the New England spiritual director for staff. So basically he checks in with all the different people working on college campuses like me around New England. And he helps run different conferences designed specifically for staff and for staff's spiritual development. So yeah, I can go, there have been times I can go months on end without seeing anybody else who works for InterVarsity. Yeah, that's gotten a lot better because I burned out really bad this summer. I felt really disconnected from the organization. I felt exhausted. I felt like I had no idea what I should be doing. I felt like I just felt like I wasn't the guy for the job in a lot of ways. Like the summer is a weird time because the students are gone, so most of your days are kind of like, spent either at your desks or at your desk at home or fundraising. And in a lot of ways, fundraising is an incredible part of the job because it lets me connect to folks around the state. But in a lot of ways, it's just an absolutely, like a bad day of fundraising is just the worst. Like a good day you feel pretty good about, but a bad day is just miserable. So I've been a lot more connected with a guy named Brian who works down at the University of New Hampshire at Durham, and that's the nearest campus that has another staff member on it. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of churches that come alongside. There are a lot of pastors that I can meet with here and there, and there are. We've been talking to a couple who are interested in volunteering and helping out over at UMF too. I just met with them for the first time this past week. And so like things have been getting a lot better, and it's really the mindfulness of it. Like it's taken a lot of conscious effort to stay connected, being so geographically distant from the rest of the organization. But now that has become a priority, it's been a lot better.
Is the college hostile?
Is the college hostile? Yes and no. I mean, it depends on what you mean by hostile. Like we aren't being pelted with stones and bricks, and we aren't being driven off with pitchforks and torches. I think for the most part, we have a really good working relationship for the most part with the faculty and staff of the university, and so we're very, very blessed to be able to have that. As far as the way the student body views us, maybe there's a lot of negative views on Christianity floating around, and I would say that I would describe it as an unreached missions field in the fact that very, very few people are coming in from a Christian background. Very few people from a Christian background are still actively trying to seek that faith. And there's just an incredible number of people who have maybe never stepped into a church in their life, don't really know. They know like Jesus as a name, but they don't know anything about what the Bible really says about him. They don't know much about the Bible at all. I'd say that it's a lot more apathy than hostility, really. It's kind of, there are those crazy people again. Anyways, back to my lunch. And in a lot of ways, the apathy is harder to deal with because, in some ways it's an environment where would truth and would belief make an impact? Like if you said, this is who God is, and they said, oh, I believe you. Oh, are you going to change anything about your life? Oh, no, not going to do that, but I believe you. And so I'd say apathy is more, maybe more what I see.
Some of us will do that, because he used to come and do the same thing you're doing right now,
Oh, yeah.
back a few moons ago.
Oh, yeah.
But when you asked us to pray for you, you mentioned that figure of $9,000, I'm assuming that's a yearly amount.
Mm.
And as we pray for him, put it more realistically, he shot $750 a month. He shot $175 a week. That's a real need for prayer. This inflation probably has outjived.
Well, yeah, there's that. There's the fact that last year, when we got fully funded, there were a lot of people who very generously gave one-time gifts or one-time grants that popped up that were not recurring in this next year. And there have been one of our more major donors has kind of had a step back and lower the amount he's been giving, just because of finances come and go sometimes. So, yeah.
Can you tell us about how many churches are helping to support you?
Yeah. I'd say there's probably a ballpark number of like 10 churches around the state that support right now. We ranging from a few churches that came in from northern Maine when I started to a lot around either like the Waterville, Augusta area over into Farmington, a lot out in western Maine. So I'd say about 10 to 12 churches currently support. Yeah. I got my degree in teaching history to high schoolers, and I just say that to make the point that I'm completely comfortable at staring at an uncomfortable, quiet group of people while they squirm. It's yeah, reminds me of the good old times.
Well, for a couple of us, maybe, how are your parents doing? Your dad still working for the state and stuff?
How are my parents doing? Yeah, no, my parents are doing really well. Yeah, Dad's still working for the state of Maine up in Presque Isle. Mom's working for a dental hygiene clinic. My sister is down in Bangor working for a hospital there, at St. Joseph's. So yeah, they're doing really well. I haven't seen them for a little while, but I'm really looking forward to being able to get back up and see them the week of Thanksgiving, because my job kind of goes. It ebbs and flows with the college season, and so half the time, you're so busy you don't know what to do, and then the other half of the time, all the college students disappear for a week, and you're like, well, what do I do now? And so, this is I'm excited for the college students to disappear for a week, so I can kind of go back up north and see them. That'll be really good.
So you say hi from us, okay?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely,
That being the trip.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So you said you got your degree in teaching.
Yeah,
Was that at Farmington?
it was at Farmington. I did get my degree in teaching, and it was at Farmington. And in a lot of ways, that's not actually advisable. Like they'll tell you in the organization, like, we really don't like to place people at the school they went to right after they graduated. But they really wanted somebody to be there and to be present, like as Jake Marcoux was phasing out. And so they kind of threw around the idea of placing me in New Hampshire for the first year or two, but I really wanted to stay in the state of Maine. I felt like there was a real need in the state of Maine. But in a lot of ways, it might not be wise to just jump right onto the college campus where you went to college, because everybody remembers you as Tom, the guy who maybe led a Bible study once in a while and was, he's fun. I like Tom. And then all of a sudden I showed up and I'm like, and I'm Jake now. I didn't change my name. A lot of paperwork, but I took on that position that he was doing, and so there's been a little bit of melancholy as I've seen all the people that I've known at college like graduate and go away and go to their different corners of the state and the country. But there's also been a lot of excitement with that, because like every time it kind of thins down the people who know me, it feels more and more like I can kind of just step more fully into the role without people who remember me from before. Just because it's really strange to try to do ministry with friends. Like, it's good to do ministry with friends, but in a lot of ways, like, the line was confusing, because you were my friend group before I took this job, and you guys are still my friends, but also I'm now kind of trying to lead this ministry on campus. I'm trying to like talk to you guys about what's going on in your lives, and it's kind of a confusing line. Like, you'd show up and grab coffee with somebody and talk about how they're doing, and in the back of your head, you're kind of scratching your head and being like, am I at work right now? Am I not at work right now? So, yeah, there have been it's been interesting jumping right on, but yeah. I'd appreciate prayers for the ministry team of students that are out at UMF as well, because how I mentioned with Colby College, we were really excited that it looked like they'd have a really steady team without them graduating out. UMF is actually kind of like a beautiful picture, a really great example of what would happen if everybody graduated. You know, we have right now we have 2 student leaders. One of them is graduating at the end of the semester, and then we will have one student leader. We've had a smaller group this year, hovering somewhere around like, at a lot of our Bible studies, we'll have 5 or 6 people show up. If we had everybody who shows up all show up at once, maybe like 12 people. Not a lot of them are at a place to be brought into a ministry leadership position with the rest of the group, and so we're just kind of, there's a little bit of a vacuum opening up there, and just kind of prayers that God would raise up students to kind of partner with us in the ministry, and that God would support the student leader who's going to be there on his own next semester. Would be deeply appreciated. It's not cataclysmic. It's kind of the natural ebb and flow of college ministry. It comes in cycles. There are booms and there are busts, but it's really good to have a full team of ministry leaders on campus so that we can kind of share together in what's going on, and so that, you know, different students have different friend groups, different students have different interests and different gifting, and it's really good to have that well-rounded leadership team.
So do you have a direct mentor or someone that you go to as a resource when you could use a helpful word?
Do I have a direct mentor? No. I have a lot of relatively somewhat a range of consistencies of how I can meet with different people. There are a lot of people who have been mentors to me, but not really in a consistent way. More and more, there have been people that I've been able to connect with more regularly. But a lot of times it's, you know, they can meet regularly for a month or so, and then after that, not so much. But it's something that I've been keeping an eye on and looking into, because I really have felt the need to connect to somebody. Kind of the best biblical comparison is like the Paul and Timothy relationship, because like, you know, when I kind of burned out this past summer, it occurred to me, you know, I'm ministering to people. I really need somebody ministering to me as well as I'm doing that, because you know, there are things that come up. There are things that come up in your own spiritual walk where you have questions or you're trying to figure it out. There are things you're ministering to students and you don't know the best move. So yeah, there have been a lot of men with InterVarsity who have been great to talk to, and I have been connecting a lot more regularly with Brian, who works down at UNH, who's been doing this for a while, and before this he was a church planner down in Pennsylvania. So yeah.
What's the level of, not just, I guess, not financial support, but interaction with the local church right in front of you? Are there local churches that you're able to plug people into?
Yeah, so how connected are we to the churches in the area? So I will simultaneously say that we do pretty well with that, but it's also something that I'm really interested in growing and expanding, because yeah, we are very connected to a couple of churches in the area, and then other than that, there's a church called Beans Corners Baptist that's out in Jay that we're pretty connected to. There's a church called Summit Faith Community that's right in town in Farmington that we're pretty connected to, but there are all sorts of churches that would be good for us to connect to. Yeah, and we do have a lot of churches that like will point students to, like if they say I'm looking for a church. Here are a lot of churches that we know in the area that are really good. But yeah, it's always good to explore all the different ways that different churches and different people in the area can help, ranging from like, you know, just having older Christians who have experienced more to check in with. Having, like, if students like need a hot meal, like, that's really good. That's something that we are. I say we a lot to say I. I'm looking at what it looks like to kind of. I've been looking at what it looks like to get more connected with them. We've connected to a local church for Thanksgiving to see people who might have openings for college students, like, so that if we run into any college students in the group or outside the group who don't have anywhere to go for Thanksgiving, either, you know, their family's really far away, they might not be on good terms with their families, and so, like, just to have a place to go and spend the holiday. So we've had a lot of families come forward for that and offer up their homes, and that's been huge.
Tom, I will say that it's been good to reacquaint with you, and it's been good to find out what your needs are. We will be in prayer for you. I would think that there's probably people here that would like to talk to you, maybe one-on-one in the foyer.
Oh yeah.
So if you would be willing to go out there and do that. And Dan, would you close us in prayer this evening, please?
Yes, sir. Father in heaven, Lord, it's been a good day. We thank you, Lord, for Tom and the willingness that he has to reach out to the youth, Lord, in this college, and what's a very dark place. Father, we just pray for him. We hold his staff up to you. Father, we would just pray that he would meet his goals as far as the financial needs, that they can get a lot more done. So, Father, we hold him up to you. We pray to keep him safe. And we pray this all in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you. It's always great to come out. Thank you. I appreciate you guys putting up with the less formal style that I get used to working with college students.